You know how there are jokes specific to professions? Like when I was a waitress and I would see that the table was almost done eating, so I'd walk over and I'd be like, "Hey y'all, how was everything?" And I'd like set the bill down, and someone would push the plate away. I'd be like, "Oh, it's disgusting. I couldn't even touch it, and it's like an empty plate." So that's the joke. And I would be like, and I would just back away slowly. I wasn't a very good waitress, and I did not give very good tips. So I've never been like a cash register guy, but I imagine like the one where you scan it and they're like, I guess it's free because it didn't scan, that kind of thing. This is what I'm talking about, except in physics. But the devastating news is that I think most of these are funny. So yeah, that's on me. I'm in my like dad era, I guess. So I'm going to tell you the 5 jokes that every physicist knows and most physicists tell. And it's not like physicists aren't funny. There are some very funny physicists and they have their own jokes, but these are like the standards, the one everybody does. And I wanted to tell them to you so when you see them in the wild, you can be like, hey, that's the thing I know. This is a countdown. Top 5 physics jokes. We're going to go from most funny to least funny because that's a funny way to do it. Physicists only have 5 jokes. Number 5, the spherical cow. So the joke goes something like this. There's a farmer. He's got 300 cows. They're not making milk. So he gets the soil tested. He has a veterinarian come in and check the cows for disease. He starts playing music for the cows. Maybe that will help them produce milk. And he's getting like super desperate. No one has answers. So he calls up the local theoretical physicist. The physicist comes down, takes some notes, and he goes away to calculate for like 3 months. And then finally the physicist calls and he's like, I have a solution to your problem. And the farmer's like, oh my God, thank you so much. And he rushes to the university and he gets to the guy's office and he just slowly stands up and he grabs a piece of chalk and he walks to the whiteboard and he's like, imagine a spherical cow in a vacuum. That's the joke. So the idea is that the world is more complicated than we could ever like calculate analytically on a chalkboard. So theorists, they always make these toy models. They make these assumptions. And so when you're giving a talk, you're not going to talk about the big complicated thing that would take hours to explain. You're going to do the toy model. So you'll say, here's the spherical cow. And I think that's funny. It's funny. I did learn, I like just tried to find the origin of this joke for this video. It's older. It's old. It's a super old joke. There's this thing from the 70s where it's a spherical chicken and the guy refers to it as an old joke. So it's 100 years old. A version of this I've done on my channel, I've probably done the spherical cow too, is the astronomer's periodic table where everything but hydrogen and helium are metals. Like it's just highlighting simplifying the problem, and I think it's funny, and it's also useful to remind your audience that you are looking at the simplest version of this problem when you're talking about it. It's kind of fun. Physicists only have 5 jokes. Number 4, the 3 states of matter. So this is the newest joke on this list. I like it and I think it's funny. It's probably 20 years old or so, and I always see it in meme form. And it's always some version of this, like you're in grade school and you learn that there are 3 states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas. And then you go to like an undergrad chemistry course and they're like, plasma, don't forget plasma. And you're like, okay, there's 4 states of matter. And then you become one of the most advanced physicists and you start learning like, oh, there's hundreds of states of matter. Why would we say that there are 3? I especially like this one. It's just funny because these things are things we would never actually see. Like you can make a Bose-Einstein condensate in a lab, but where would you find it in nature? On the surface of a neutron star with a lifetime of like 6 minutes. Like you're not going to run into these things. These are exotic states of matter. They're not really the states of matter. I always like these kind of things where it's like a hump you have to overcome. Like you learn that there are 3 states of matter in grade school and then you're like, wait, plasma, and then you're at the top of the hump and you're like, there's so many states of matter. And then your real big scientist energy is when you cross over that and you realize like, there's only 3 states of matter. These things are interesting. We'll study them. But like, we don't need to teach the kids. And I think that that's fun. Physicists only have 5 jokes. Number 3, statistical mechanics suicide. I'm writing a video about temperature right now, and I'm, of course, looking at all the statistical mechanical stuff. And this joke kept coming up, so that's what inspired this video. It's chapter 1, section 1 of a book called States of Matter by David Goodstein, and let me read it to you. Ludwig Boltzmann, who spent much of his life studying statistical mechanics, died in 1906 by his own hand. Paul Ehrenfest, carrying on the work, died similarly in 1933. Now it is our turn to study statistical mechanics. Okay, so I'm going to admit that I do find this very funny. It's a funny joke. If the definition of funny you follow is that something unexpected happens, which is like the simplest definition of what is funny, something unexpected. This is an unexpected thing to see in your statistical mechanics textbook at like 8:30 a.m. It's funny. But if you consider like the real human tragedy of like these people who had mental illness and ended their own life, is it still funny? Like as someone who has been depressed clinically for years and years and years and years and years, I still think it's funny. Like if you don't laugh, you cry, right? It's funny. It's a funny way to word this sentence. Actually, if I'm critiquing this joke, there's this line here that says, perhaps it will be wise to approach the subject cautiously, and I think that kind of ruins the joke. It makes it less funny. If I was to edit this joke, I would just take that out and just go to the next sentence. But I still think it's funny. However, I could understand someone who has never been depressed would find this weird and off-putting in their textbook. And even worse, someone who has maybe lost a loved one to mental illness. Like, imagine you told this joke in a colloquium and some guy runs out crying. Like, you don't want to be that guy. So while I think it's funny, it's not appropriate for like a school setting. Like, write your physics stand-up routine and put this in there. But I don't think it's appropriate. So I think it's funny, but I don't say it. And I haven't put it in a video. And I don't think I will. Well, I mean, technically right here, but with an explanation. It's in this video right now. But there's an explanation about why, while I think it's funny, I can see how it's inappropriate. And I certainly would not do this in a classroom. But it is funny. I love that there's actually a Snopes article about this. Like, people can't believe it. Like, a physicist would make a joke? Oh my goodness. Snopes article. But I mean, it's in the textbook. It's in all the textbooks. All the physicists do all the jokes all the time. That's why this is a video. Everyone is doing this joke all the time. Physicists only have 3 jokes. Number 2, plasma. I'm realizing right at this moment that my physicists only have 5 jokes list. Like, number 4 is about the 3 states of matter. Number 3 was from a textbook called The 3 States of Matter. And number 2 is about plasma and the 3 states of matter. So, like, maybe physicists only have 3 jokes because this is all the same joke. But hear me out. I'm writing them from most funny to least funny. And this is one that I find, like, charming. So let me tell it to you. So plasma is considered the 4th state of matter. Here's another meme that should go in that other joke. It's an ionized gas, and it doesn't behave like regular gas on Earth. Like, stars are made up of plasma. Okay. And in the 70s and 80s, plasma was considered to be the dominant form of matter in the universe. Because if you look at the universe, what you see is stars. Stars are plasma. So if you were to go to a talk by a plasma physicist in the 70s or the 80s, they would say something like, it's kind of funny how plasma physicists only make up 8% of physicists, but 99% of matter in the universe is plasma. Ha ha ha. I was not alive in the 70s and 80s, and I have never heard this joke in person. What I have heard is the updated version, because you see, eventually, it became generally accepted by the entire community that the driving matter in the universe is not plasma. It's dark matter. We can't see it. We observe its effects. It behaves like matter. And it's now accepted by the community that 99% of the matter in the universe is not plasma. It's like 80, whatever the pie chart of dark matter, dark energy and matter and all that good stuff. But they couldn't drop the joke. Like, the plasma physicists have accepted the evidence for dark matter, and it's still an open question what that is. But they haven't dropped the joke. So now plasma physicists, when they give a talk, they can't say, it makes up 99% of the universe. Aren't I the most important type of physicist? Because that's not true anymore. But they can't not tell the joke. Like, they have to. It's like a compulsion. They're called by the spirit. So now they do like this weird, funny, twisted version where they're like, we used to be the best, and now there's dark matter, and nobody knows what that is. And it's not that it's funny, but I do find it very charming. I find it adorable that they can't help themselves. Like, they're just compelled to say, well, it used to be a thing that 99% of the matter was plasma. Plasma's important. And I think it's adorable. The cute little plasma physicists with their cute little joke. It's actually in Chen. So I've talked about this book before, and I talked about how I specifically bought the 1976 version. So, section 1.1, introduction, it says, it has often been said that 99% of the matter in the universe is in the plasma state. Like, he does the joke. And in the updated textbook, he can't do the joke anymore. So in the book about plasma, he's talking about dark matter for some reason. Let me find it. Hang on. Okay. So the updated version of this book has added and controlled fusion, because he talks about controlled fusion in it, because it's only 10 years away. And in the book from the 70s, he says, it has been said that 99% of the matter in the universe is in the plasma state. And in the new book, updated in the 2000s, it starts with, it is now believed that the universe is made up of 69% dark energy, 27% dark matter, and 1% normal matter. All that we can see in the sky is the part of normal matter that is in the plasma state, emitting radiation. So you see, they're still the most important, because what you can see is plasma, and that's what matters. Physicists only have 5 jokes. Number 1, Schrodinger's Cat. So I'm ranking these from most funny to least funny, and Schrodinger's Cat is the least funny. I wouldn't even call it a joke, really, but because physicists say it as if it's a joke, well, we have to deal with that. But first, we have to talk about actual Schrodinger's cat. I know that Schrodinger's cat is in, like, the global lexicon. Like, everybody is aware of Schrodinger's cat, but I don't know if people realize that it is a joke. It extends the idea of the probability of quantum mechanics to macroscopic objects, pointing out, like, the absurdity and the ridiculous of, like, the superposition of states idea. I will read you the text that Erwin Schrödinger wrote down about Schrodinger's cat. But first, because this is YouTube, and if you talk about a person who is bad without saying that they're bad, you get in trouble. I will say, yes, I do know Erwin Schrödinger was a pedophile. I know that he was vocal and proud about grooming and raping girls, and I think that that's bad. And I don't understand how people worked with him at the time when he was, like, pretty open about it. It is bad and yucky. And yeah, cancel Schrödinger. Go back in time and cancel Schrödinger. Okay, here's the quote. One can even set up quite ridiculous cases. A cat is penned up in a steel chamber along with the following device, which must be secured against direct interference by the cat. In a Geiger counter, there is a tiny bit of radioactive substance, so small that perhaps in the course of 1 hour, one of the atoms decays, but also with equal probability perhaps none. If it happens, the counter tube discharges and through a relay releases a hammer that shatters a small flask of hydrocyanic acid. If one has left the entire system to itself for an hour, one would say that the cat still lives, if meanwhile no atom has decayed. The first atomic decay would have poisoned it. The psi function of the entire system would express this by having it in the living and dead cat, pardon the expression, mixed or smeared out in equal parts. It is typical of these cases that an indeterminacy originally restricted to the atomic domain becomes transformed into macroscopic indeterminacy, which can then be resolved by direct observation. That prevents us from so naively accepting as valid a blurred model for representing reality. In itself, it would not embody anything unclear or contradictory. There is a difference between a shaky or out-of-focus photograph and a snapshot of clouds and fog banks. So this is funny exactly one time. You learn quantum mechanics. You learn about the probabilistic nature of fundamental particles, and you put all that in your brain. You start developing a physical intuition for how particles behave, and then right at the end of the class, they slap you with this, and you realize how ridiculous it is, how absurd it would be to put quantum mechanics, probabilistic nature of teeny tiny particles onto macroscopic objects. Erwin Schrödinger is not saying, oh, you don't know if the cat's alive or dead. Erwin Schrödinger is saying, wouldn't it be ridiculous to think that? And I think it's funny. It's funny to hear this after spending 2 semesters learning quantum mechanics and realizing, like, oh, you need to keep reality in your brain. Reality is macroscopic. Quantum mechanics is, of course, real. Like, we observe it. We can do experiments and see it. But you can't leave reality and talk about macroscopic objects as if they are quantum mechanical. They are on the quantum mechanical level, but a cat is a macroscopic object. It will either be alive or dead. And it is funny the first time you see that. However, when physicists do Schrodinger's cat as a joke, they're not doing the joke. The joke's been done. Schrödinger did the joke one time, and it was funny. Now they just say Schrodinger's cat and expect you to laugh. Please don't think I'm not fun, because I like all the other jokes. This isn't a joke. This is just a reference. Someone's giving a colloquium and they're like, we call this Schrodinger's laser. And they pause for a laugh as if that's a joke. It's not a joke. Schrodinger's blank as a rhetorical device, as I said, is just in the way we speak. It is a thing that you can use to get a point across that people understand. Like, I've seen it as Schrodinger's immigrant. Have you ever heard of this? It's pointing out the absurdity of the idea that simultaneously immigrants are coming here to like be lazy and mooch off of our social services. What are those? We don't have healthcare. And then also the immigrants, they're coming here to steal your jobs. So somehow the immigrants are lazy and they're also so hardworking that they're going to take your job. It's Schrodinger's immigrant. This cannot be true. It's absurd. It's absurd to hold both of these beliefs in your head. It's Schrodinger's immigrant. That makes perfect sense. It's not funny. It's not a joke. It's a reference to the thing. And it works. It works as a rhetorical device. It's kind of like the word Kafkaesque. Your coworker is 30 minutes late to a meeting, and she's like, I had a Kafkaesque situation at the DMV. You don't have to have read Kafka to understand what Kafkaesque means. It's like a horrible bureaucratic situation when the bureaucracy has overtaken the actual human element of the situation, right? You know what that means, even if you don't know Kafka. You know what Schrodinger's blank means, even if you don't know quantum mechanics. But those things are not jokes. I know that right now, in the comments of this video, somebody is like tip-tap typing, like, oh, it's like Schrodinger's joke, it's only fun. It's not funny. That's not a good comment. It's not a joke. It's just a reference. And you know, one time they asked Heisenberg if he thought the Schrodinger's cat joke was funny, and he said he was uncertain. See, that's not funny either. I think it bothers me because people think it's like an inside joke. People are like, yeah, only smart people know Schrodinger's cat, but like everybody knows Schrodinger's cat. We don't have to like gatekeep physics jokes. There are some good ones. This is not a good one. It's no good. Oh, you didn't laugh when I said Schrodinger's cat. Out of context. You must not understand it. Can I explain Schrodinger's cat? Like, oh my god, it's exhausting.